This week, you'll meet three fascinating guests who have served our country with distinction in the Foreign Service, the White House, and the U.S. State and Commerce Departments. Our focus is international student exchange programs with special attention to the relationship between the United States and China. This is America and the World. This is America and the World is brought to you by Japan. History, hospitality, and advanced technology sharing tomorrow. The Washington Diplomat, a world of news and perspective. The Sultanate of Oman. The USChina Education Trust and F.Y. Chang Foundation, Julia Chang Bloch, President. The Rotendaro Family Trust. The Forerunner Foundation, dedicated to forward-thinking public policy. And the Embassy Series, uniting people through musical diplomacy, presenting international artists in diplomatic settings. Hank, thank you for visiting with us this afternoon.
Well, the pleasure is mine, certainly.
When you look at China today, what do you see?
I see an increasingly complex country that poses a complicated set of challenges for the United States, which are poorly understood in certain quarters. You know, many Chinese like to say that Chinese understand the U.S. more than than Americans understand China. Frankly, I'm not convinced that that's the case. Of course, a lot of the understanding of the United States by Chinese people comes via movies and TV shows, which don't necessarily paint the most nuanced, in-depth picture of the United States. And even among Chinese scholars of the United States, I think there's still a lot more that can be done to help them dig deeper into U.S. history, the role of religion, demographics, and how that interacts with our political and economic system.
How would you characterize right now the relationship between the two countries?
The worst, the relationship, I would say, is the worst it's been since Richard Nixon stepped off the plane in China in 1972. Within the last few years, in part due to changes in China, movement, policies, and rhetoric that from the American point of view is moving in the wrong direction, and then changes in the policy environment here in Washington, which again, from my personal point of view, is moving us in the wrong direction. So the net result is moving from a period when there was an effort to balance our differences and cooperation with China into a period now where there's a much heavier focus on our differences, and China is viewed as almost solely as a competitor and not a cooperator. And you know, that's the difficult part in managing the relationship, in drafting a strategy, because you're trying to balance two, if not contradictory, at least two factors that arguably run in different directions. And the challenge is how do you balance those and keep those both alive? As I say, I think current administration and many in the policy community have given up on the complexity of the relationship and are focused solely on the differences.
And the differences are showing up mainly when we look at the headlines in the newspapers or on television is tariffs, and economy and trade, huh?
That certainly is capturing most of the attention. That's right. I mean, unfortunately, of course, the differences go well beyond that to issues of Chinese behavior in the South China Sea and human rights. And lack of access to information for Chinese citizens and so forth and so on. But certainly in the press, the trade and investment issues loom very large. After all, those are the issues that really impact the American pocketbook directly.
When you look at the two systems of government, the two countries, and you look at politics and society and culture, Are there vast differences, and can there be vast similarities, or is it just too much at opposite ends?
Well, there certainly are very significant differences in history and culture, political system, economic system, values. Having said that, it's a cliche, but true nonetheless, that at some fundamental level, all people around the world want the same things and want to be safe and well-fed and have a roof over their heads. But that plays out, that search for those things plays out in different countries and different regions against a backdrop of different histories, different cultures, different political and economic systems. And so to say that the US, Americans and Chinese share many basic goals is true. And yet at the same time, they're operating in very different environments, and that creates significant differences.
When you look at America and you see democracy and freedoms, and then you look at China and you say no Facebook, no Twitter, that kind of communication absolutely cut off, how do we ever expect to bring those two together?
Well, I think that the challenge is creating an environment in which Chinese leaders believe that opening their country more benefits China. The current administration is relying on coercion through the use of punitive tariffs to try to force economic changes in China, and I just don't believe that's going to be successful.
Going off in a totally different direction, how about this student exchange, educational exchange? What role does that play in bringing the countries together?
Over 30 years of working kind of in the front lines of US-China relations, I've come to realize that it's really important to understand the perspective of the other person or the other country on the other side of the table. Understanding where they're coming from doesn't mean you're going to agree with them or you even like them. It doesn't mean you are necessarily going to solve the problems you have, but it creates a foundation which makes solutions to problems that much more likely. And at a minimum, it contributes to avoiding unnecessary damaging conflicts. And so student exchanges, I think, are tremendously important in that regard, recognizing that some Chinese students will come to the US and leave and never really penetrate US society, unfortunately. And some Americans will go study in China and come back and never really penetrate Chinese society, but a percentage will. And that becomes a very important element in the overall relationship.
You have, last question as we come to the end of our short time together, you've been a supporter of the US-China Education Trust for a long time. How do you see what Ambassador Bloch is trying to do?
What Ambassador Bloch is doing is unique and uniquely important. As I mentioned, I think there's still quite a distance to go yet for Chinese experts, rising Chinese leaders, to deepen their understanding of the United States and the complex factors that lie behind our current behavior and our current politics and attitudes towards China. And US-China Education Trust is the only organization I'm aware of which is focused like a laser, as they say, on supporting the efforts of Chinese scholars and academics and rising leaders to substantially deepen their understanding of the United States. And that's just tremendously important work, and no one else is doing very much of it, unfortunately.
We're going to talk to Ambassador Bloch shortly. Thank you so much for the education and sitting with us today.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ambassador, I read something that you said in an interview that China and the United States must get along or there's no hope or a prayer. Elaborate.
Well, The US-China relationship, bar none, is the most important bilateral relationship in the 21st century. If we don't get along, and if we don't avoid the Thucydides gap, since Sparta and Athens, when a rising power challenges the status quo power, it inevitably, most often, leads to war. And this world would not be able to withstand a third world war.
Rising power China, status quo United States,
Right?
banging heads.
Yes.
How would you characterize the relationship today?
Bad, deteriorating, and getting worse. Not good.
How did that all happen?
I think fundamentally, it's because our two countries are very different, ideologically, politically, and as well, culturally, and if you look at our values, they're also different. We have not been able to manage what I would call, other people have called, the strategic distrust between our two countries.
Distrust, huh?
Distrust. We have never trusted each other. When Nixon went to China, the primary motivation was to stop Russia against the Soviet Union. It was not just about the two countries. And that trust has festered because China is now a contender, a global power contender.
So when you take mistrust over here and your mission on the other side, how do you bring the two together?
Well, it's been 20 years. It really began when Peking University invited me on campus in 1998 during their centennial to help them revive their American Studies Center. They wanted to know more about America. And as I spent my time at Beida, at Peking University, I really discovered that the Chinese, who always think they know more about the United States than we know about them, I came to believe not quite. Because China's America experts, and Peking University had many, they had only a surface understanding about the United States. But to be frank, much of the research in those days done about America were basically surfing, the New York Times or the Washington Post. So I felt that the least I could do as a Chinese American was to serve as a bridge between the two countries and two cultures, and try to help the Chinese better understand America, because there were so many American organizations and associations that were working on helping Americans understand China. But the other side needs work too.
So you're bringing American studies, American values, American culture. What are some of the programs over the years that you've brought to the Chinese?
Well, our focus is really on education and exchange. And as I said, building the communication and the interpersonal relationships that hopefully will endure when government-to-government relations fracture. And this has happened. I just returned from China. We do spring programs and fall programs. This is our spring set of programming. And we launched a very interesting and fun culinary diplomacy series of programs. And at one dinner in Shanghai, where we were eating Chinese American food or Chinese fusion food, which combines both Chinese and American cooking techniques and ingredients.
Right.
And it was delicious. But at that dinner sat 3 generations of Fudan University in Shanghai's professors. 3 generations. And one of the professors remembered that his teacher took him for the first visit to the American consulate. He still remembered that, and our current Consul General was sitting at the table. So, despite our worsening relationships, government to government, the relationships that you said, or the US-China Education Trust, has built over these 20 years, they are still there. And they maintain, certainly, civility.
Scholars and students, huh?
Yeah. Well, now the students are no longer students. They are also professors. You know,
So you have educated, in many ways, leaders of tomorrow in China.
oh, no, I wouldn't go that far.
No.
We have played a part.
Yeah, but
I wouldn't say educated them. I would say help them to learn and understand America through direct experiences where possible.
so you're involved in that understanding America.
Yes. And I don't believe you can do it through academics alone. So the US-China Education Trust, we've always combined theory with practice.
What one thing do you try to get the Chinese to understand about America? One thing.
That we are a free and democratic nation, but we are fair, and we aim to be a nation that embraces diversity, that promotes the public good and global welfare. I hope that we can maintain our traditional values, because despite the fact that American popularity around the world unfortunately has been slipping, nevertheless, from this immigrant's view, America is still the greatest nation on earth.
Ambassador, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Tara, thank you for sitting with me.
Welcome to the Elliott School of International Affairs. It's great to have you.
That is my first question. Tell us about the Elliott School.
Well, this is a graduate education center for international activity, in that students come here to get a master's in international affairs. These are the change agents. These are the global change makers that are going to go out and solve a lot of the global problems that plague you and all of us.
That's in your arena of diplomacy, isn't it?
This is a form of educational diplomacy. This is where you train the future diplomats, the future World Bank managers, the future human rights negotiators, the future, I hope, Nobel Peace Prize winners. Many of them had study abroad in the Nobel track.
So it's not just about military power and economics.
It's about people to people and about the exchange of ideas in an academic setting, but with an eye toward a professional global leader who is going to bring about positive change.
How many students are here?
I have, and we have, about 400 in the first year and 400 in the second year, unless something happens and they don't pass and move on. And as a career advisor, as a career coach, I have about 800 students with another career advisor, and we have alumni who return and are making a career shift or looking at what role they can play professionally using this master's degree.
Open-ended question, but where do they come from?
Well, we have US students and we have international students. And I would say somewhere between 16 to 20% come from other countries and join with American students. So we have international students and US students.
And how are they selected? Is it tough to get in?
They compete the way you did when you went to college or graduate school. You apply, and somebody is on an admissions committee and says yay or nay.
This university, George Washington University, and the Elliott School, terrific reputation. How about the faculty? You got some winners on the faculty?
Well, firstly, we have a great dean who hails from the diplomatic community. Dean Brigady was himself an ambassador to the African Union and a military man by training. So you start with leadership. You have a good leader, and then you have well-known faculty and scholars across all these disciplines, regions, Latin America, Asia, Western Hemisphere, Europe, Africa, and you have all these sectors, space, technology, human rights, development, law. So we look at regions and functions, and therein lies who can problem solve. The key to all of this is, can you develop talent to solve critical global problems?
In a big picture, talking about student exchange, do we know how many foreign students are studying in the United States? Any idea?
Thankfully, we have an Institute of International Education. Thankfully, they publish an Open Doors report. And this year, they reported that over 1 million international students are here in the United States, generating over $40 billion in revenue to the United States of America where they study.
Oh, so that's a moneymaker for us, huh?
It's big business.
I would imagine it's tuition, it's outside activities, room, board, those kind of things?
We are an enormous destination for international students. As I say, over 1 million, and they generate over $40 billion.
Do we know what country sends the most?
The number one sender is China. They send the most, the greatest numbers of students here, and we have to hope we can keep it up. We have competition now from the British, the Australians, the Canadians, all becoming magnets for Chinese students and other students. And we have to maintain our global position as a destination.
Are we slipping?
We are slipping in enrollment in the last few years.
Why these other countries and not the United States?
It's a competitive market to have an educational system that young people want to come to. When you talk to international students here and American students, what you hear is how fortunate they feel to be in the United States educational system. But the British, the Canadians, the Australians are upping their game, and Chinese institutions are getting better. So we're going to have to fight for the traffic.
Give me the number one headline on this idea of student exchange.
It is in our interest to bring people here and to send young people overseas. The headline is the notion of solving international problems: climate, cancer, conflict, space. No country is going to do it alone.
We need each other?
We have no choice. If we're going to solve a puzzle, that last piece might come from a Chinese lab. It might come from a European organization. The Nobel Peace Prize winner could come from any place in the world. We have to do this together.
Thank you, Tara.
Thank you.
Terrific.
It's a pleasure.
For information about This Is America in the World, visit our website, ThisIsAmerica.net, or our YouTube channel, This Is America TV, and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. This Is America in the World is brought to you by Japan, history, hospitality, and advanced technology, sharing tomorrow. The Washington Diplomat, a world of news and perspective. The Sultanate of Oman. The USChina Education Trust and F.Y. Chang Foundation. Julia Chang Bloch, President. The Rotendaro Family Trust. The Forerunner Foundation, dedicated to forward-thinking public policy. And the Embassy Series, uniting people through musical diplomacy, presenting international artists in diplomatic settings.